Burgess here with Music Marketing TV, and today we're diving into Phase Plant by Kilohearts. We're going to be looking at making this noise base. This is a patch I created. It's kind of a complicated patch, so I'm just going to walk you through the process and the key important steps. Let me go ahead and play it for you. This is what the patch sounds like. It's this bass sound. Yeah, so very, very nice. Let's get rid of the drums. And it's actually a noise patch. It's if I hold it, it's noise. It's 100% noise. In fact, if I get rid of the processing on the two lanes, that's the input. I love stuff like this. You just wouldn't guess it. So here we go. Let's dive into how to make this. So first, I wanted to do something interesting with noise. That was the initial starting point. And there's some FM stuff going on here. None of it's all that important, but the key thing that makes this whole thing work is first we have noise, then we hit a resonator, and the resonator is really responsible for giving it pitch. It's not the only thing that gives it pitch, but this is kind of like a big deal. If I turn this off, it sounds like this. And then that sound, it doesn't have a pitch, but it gives it like a shape. Those are the filters. If I lose, especially this one. Yeah. So kind of a disaster without these things. So these are really, really important. So let's talk about these steps first. So you get noise set up. You can pretty much do whatever you want with the noise. We can make it different. You get different kinds of sounds out. I ended up going for the smooth noise. There's a bunch of different options. But we hit the resonator. Resonator is being changed by a note module. And this note module, I've set it up at 100% so that when I play notes, it changes what's being played. It's moving. It's kind of hard to tell because the dot's so small. But it's moving up and down according to the note that I play. And that's causing the resonator. And it doesn't look like it's changing, but if you look, the orange line is changing. So it's resonating at different notes. And that's what allows me to tune the noise. So that is the resonator and what its deal is. And then this is also very important. I have this envelope here. It's doing, just an up-down kind of a thing. And this envelope is moving this low-pass filter. And so this gives the shape of the sound and makes it so that it's not just a constant bleeding of noise. That would be it if I didn't have this step. So these are the two most important steps by a lot. And the lanes kind of have jobs. This lane's job is loosely to get the pitch and timbre. And lane 2's job is loosely to control the space. If we lose this, that's what we have. So let's now go to the beginning, now that you've seen sort of the key steps, and look at the general creation of the patch. So I grabbed a noise module, and the noise module, when you add a module, you should get an output module, or you can add one yourself. If you don't have one, you just go to output. And from the output, you can FM it against itself. And I was like, well, that's an interesting thing. So I did a bunch of FMing. It doesn't make a big difference after the chain's put in place. This is what it sounds like. So not a huge difference. If we put one back, this is phase modulation. We add another FM, and then some more FM. So it makes it a bit tighter, definitely sort of just messing around with all the different noise options I have. So my recommendation is just put it back into itself. These are not precise moves at all. So moving over to the lane, this is where things begin to get kind of interesting. So first up, we need a way to tune this noise. So let's turn off everything else in the chain and go through, because I did kind of add these things one after the other. Okay, so first up, we hit this resonator. And right now, all I'm happy with is I now have a way to tune it. That's basically it. Intensity all the way up, mix all the way up. I'm using the square wave version. You can try out the sawtooth. That's kind of cool too. Whatever floats your boat. So that's the resonator, and it's using the note module. I'm setting the note module to a few things, as we'll see. And let's go ahead, let's close this. Up next, we hit the filter. Filter's got this envelope that moves it up and down. And this is nice because it gives shape to the sound. And it's very, right now, we're losing all the high end. And it's losing texture because I'm using the smooth noise option. We're going to get this stuff back. Also note that that wiping sound is from the cue of the filter. So that is what is making that sound. After these two, we hit another filter, and this time it's a peaking filter. And as it moves around, you see this is being controlled by the LFO. It's just to create color as the sound moves. It does get triggered, so it's consistent. But it's just to make up a bit for what this filter's doing without it. So it creates a little pocket sort of for us to pay more attention to. After that, we hit an ensemble. So this just creates copies of the notes and smears them all over the place. You can hear the phasing going on now. So this is, I was just looking for ways to smooth it out. From there, we hit another filter. This time it's a high pass, just looking to get rid of some of that low end mud. If I play this, and just listen to all that stuff down there. Now we put this in. It's gone. It sounds a lot cleaner that way. So it's gonna fight less with the drums, which is basically the goal here, because this thing is noise, so it just eats the entire band width. So this is a sound that if you're going to use a sound like this, generally not going to want to have a bunch of other elements going on that are way different than it, because they're all going to fight for the, this thing's going to fight for the everything, all the space in your mix. So use a sound like this, you know, generally it's going to be the star of the show, or you're going to leave it out at moments to make room for other things. Next up, we hit an EQ. We're putting the highs and mids back because of what we did up here. It's kind of disappeared. That's the effect that this has. Not like a super important move, but you know, it's just a tone call. Up next, we hit a distortion. This one, I just like the distortion. I'll toss it on in different areas. I move it throughout the chain, just see where would a distortion fit. Will it work well here? So this again wasn't a move that I was like, oh, I know exactly what I want. This was like, oh no, I'm just experimenting. But it brings out the grit, and we begin to get that texture out of the noise, and the noisy texture a little bit more pronounced in a way that sounds like it's kind of like a rippling texture instead of just noise per se, if that makes sense. We've conditioned the noise down to something that will fit better with the sound we're going after. So at this point, we're ready to start looking at how we're going to put in space. Another key thing that the distortion does is it adds the high end back. So without it, even with the 3-band EQ, it's still very much missing that high end. One of the great properties of distortion is, and depending on the distortion you pick, is it can add high end back in, put new frequencies into your signal that you can then use to recover parts of the frequency spectrum in interesting ways. So that's another reason that I reach for the distortion, is if you're lacking especially high end, distortion could be a really great way to get some of that back. And you might consider also band passing your distortion, or like post filtering it and taking out like low end again and things like that, because distortion will add all kinds of stuff in. So usually there's like some filtering considered afterwards. You can see I'm not done with various filters, but at this point, this sound is kind of where I want it, and I'm not too concerned about low end. And most distortions will not add frequencies below, unless you have aliasing problems, below your fundamentals. So they'll only really mess with frequencies above them. That's most common distortions. This one, for example, overdrive, will have this property given that aliasing doesn't become a problem. There are other styles of distortion where you can introduce frequencies below. But I don't need to worry about that here because I'm not using that. So anyways, that's another reason why I reach for the distortion. We go for the comb filter after this. So this one again is just going to add texture. It also moves around with the, I believe it's the note. Yep, with the note command. So this kind of tunes it as well. Gives it a little bit more bite. If I had to take this off versus with. In fact, let's do the example. And then off. See how it just kind of, it like lacks a clear note. And so this comb filters can be great for that because they're going to cause very easily repeatable holes, which can be discerned as a spectrum. So that's why I chose a comb filter. Setting wise, I don't think I messed with anything too much. I don't remember at this point. I just remember comb filter. The big important part is that you're modulating this with the note so it's consistent as it moves around. Up next, we have Disperser. Disperser is a weird thing. Half the time I'm grabbing it is because it has this smearing property. If we lose this, versus you can hear it sounds sort of blingy a little bit, but also sounds quite a bit tighter. And Disperser is just a really interesting one. You're going to want to mess with the pinch and with the amount, and moving this around can do some crazy things. I did try messing with a bunch of dispersers in a row, each doing slightly different frequencies, and that can get really crazy, and it didn't work out in this patch. So I wound up going with just the singular one. I like the smearing that it brought to the table, and I kind of left it at that. And the disperser is being actually automated by this envelope over here. It's a slightly different envelope. Has a faster attack and release. Why didn't I use this one over here? Tried it, didn't like it as much. So I made a new one. That's what you do. So that's disperser. Up next, we hit a reverb. And right here, we just pop this on. We're finally adding some space to it, so it's not like some weird sound that's in some impossible place. Sounds like it's actually somewhere now, so this is a big deal. After this, sort of interestingly, I tossed a comb filter on it. Another comb filter, again, slightly moving around. This could be something interesting to do where you have two sets of harmonics that are slightly moving around. This is more reminiscent of like what a drum head would do rather than a resonating like flute or pipe per se. So this was sort of just an experiment. It worked out. This is what it sounds like. So you can hear the high end specifically really benefited from it. If we take this off with it on. So just a nice little touch going on. And it's interesting because it's pretty low. So I don't claim to understand entirely this move. It's largely an experiment mixed way down. If we bring this like way up, that's what it sounds like when you bring it up. So kind of cool. Those extra set of harmonics just phase canceling everywhere just kind of worked out. And finally, we have a phase distortion. And it's just another distortion, kind of along similar lines of this one. Just kind of wanted to see what I could do. And in this case, regular distortion was cool. I wound up liking the phase distortion more. Without it, not a huge difference here because it sounds already so crazy. This mostly, if you can, is listen very carefully, is just really for the reverb. So if I take this off, now we'll put it on. Listen for the verb. The verb, it almost sounds like a low pass filters on it, but it's not. It's actually a phase distortion, and almost sounds like a bit crusher as well, but it's not. It's a phase distortion unit. So pretty interesting style of distortion, and it makes the verb sort of match the color of the bass a bit better. So that's why I went with that. And that's the patch. So not the most complicated patch. There are a few things in here that I didn't really end up using. There's this multiply unit, which what it's doing is you can feed it in and then you can feed it out to control things. But I wound up not hooking it up into anything afterwards, in case you're wondering, hey, what's the deal with this multiply unit? Can be useful for getting better ranges out. You can use it to experiment with the note module. So for example, we could have this increase the amount that the note module would move around by, and then have this control it instead. And that's one way you could get sort of a more drastic change. Can be pretty useful also for cases like comb filters, where you want the comb filter to move around, but you need it to move around more, but you want it to be related to the note you're pushing. So you can set up this sort of a relationship and screw around with that and get a little bit more range out of your modulators. So things like that. But I wound up just going fine with just the regular old note output. But that is the noise base in a nutshell. So hopefully you picked up a couple key ideas. A really interesting patch. It takes a while to make a patch like this because there's just a lot of experimenting that goes on. If you have any questions about this, feel free to let me know. Subscribe and hit that bell icon for future videos, and have a blessed day.